From KBIA and the Reynolds Journalism Institute. On air and online, this is Intersection.
Hello and welcome to Intersection, where people and ideas meet online and on KBIA. I'm Ryan Famuliner. Last week, Columbia's Board of Education approved new attendance boundaries for Mill Creek Elementary. The move, which was made to address overcrowding at the school, reduces enrollment there by about 100 students in the next school year. Some parents have since voiced concern about diversity at the school. Currently, 12% of Mill Creek students receive free or reduced lunch. It's estimated the redistricting plan will lower that to 6%. This ongoing debate got us thinking, how should we manage population growth in Columbia while making sure that all students receive a good education? Today on Intersection, we'll talk about efforts to manage overcrowding in Columbia Public Schools, and we'll also talk about ways to reduce the achievement gap. Joining me in studio, Chris Belcher is the superintendent of Columbia Public Schools. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Christine King is the president of the Columbia Board of Education. Christine, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And Jonathan Sessions is a member of the Columbia Board of Education. Jonathan, welcome. All right. And do you have a child that attends Mill Creek? How will the boundary changes affect you? Give us a call at 573-882-8925 or email intersection@kbia.org. You could also tweet at intersectkbia. Okay, so to start off, I guess maybe Christine or Chris, you may be able to help us a little bit, just summarizing this, what happened last week, the attendance boundary changes for Mill Creek Elementary, and what we're going to see next year, I guess.
Well, and I think over the last actually couple years, Dr. Belcher and Dr. Superman have been very active with Mill Creek parents and staff with addressing the enrollment and the overcapacity issue at Mill Creek Elementary. And we agreed last year that we would not do anything for this current school year that we're in, but we said we knew this current school year we had to plan for the next 2 years. And so that brought us to the point that we were at where we had to draw some boundary lines. I mean, we had to make some adjustments. And the problem with boundaries, as Dr. Belcher and Dr. Sievelman can attest, it's you swing the pendulum too far one way or the other, and you've created overcrowding issues at another school. So we had to be very cognizant of that. And so where we're at now gives some relief to Mill Creek, even though we know potentially other families may move into that attendance boundaries over the next year. And I don't know if Dr. Belcher wants to add any more to that.
Well, I would add that we're over capacity in most of our elementary schools. If there's a trailer at the elementary school, it's over capacity, because those schools were built for a certain population and they have restrooms and cafeteria and gym space for like Mill Creek for 700, but we have 850 students in there. So Mill Creek is probably the one that's the most over capacity though at this point. So we talked last year, the parents sort of said, can you stay one more year before we make this decision? We said yes. Probably shouldn't have. We probably should have acted last year, but we knew that would probably be it. But oddly enough, several years before, we've twice have made these kind of changes in other areas and not had a lot of press about it. We moved a group of kids from Alpha Lewis literally a year after it was open because the growth there was so rapid, and put 90 kids into Parkade Elementary School, and things just went extremely well. The parents are happy and transportation is taken care of, etc. We had to shuffle some kids back and forth from Shepherd 2 years in a row to equalize Alpha Heart boundaries and Shepherd's boundaries also. And we'll be doing this not annually, but probably close to every 2 or 3 years as we begin staggering the opening of new elementary schools. It's a normal process of a growing school district. It's healthy, it's good, and when we transfer students from one school to another, they're the same quality of instruction, the same quality of principals and staff. It's an emotional issue for parents, and we recognize that.
And just for the nitty gritty of it, can we say what's happening with those? How many students are being split up? And I think they're going to 3 different schools, correct?
Yeah, there's about 65 students going to Paxton.
And the other about 40 students are being split between Russell and Grant.
Yes.
Okay.
And the board still has to make decisions on. We tabled some things from our last meeting about. We're giving the option of 5th graders to stay at Mill Creek, but we have not decided if we are going to grandfather the siblings in. Now, we've not done that in the past. In the past, when we've opened up new schools and we've made changes, we haven't necessarily made 5th graders stay or leave. If we grandfather siblings and allow them to stay, it defeats the purpose of what we're trying to do. And the board talked about that last week. But we'll talk about that at our January work session,
No,
board
meeting.
meeting, yes.
And you mentioned earlier the trailers, Superintendent Belcher, and so is that one of the main goals, I guess, here too, in general with these, is to try to alleviate having to use those trailers, and also, I guess, just getting a better balance? Or?
When I came here 5 years ago, the most obvious need in the district was really a quality 10-year facility plan, because there was 164 trailers serving as instructional space in the school district. That's almost 20% of students run a trailer at some time during the day. We had a secondary plan that was starting into motion, and we're now at the point where we're starting to slowly get rid of secondary trailers in most locations, although there's a few nuances there. But the elementary schools is the next big step. We have about 104 trailers or more serving elementary schools. When you look at trailers, our average trailer is over 11 years old, which is the designated lifespan of those trailers. They're not safe during inclement weather where you have to bring kids inside. Their utility usage is probably
It's about triple.
60%, triple,
Yeah.
maybe more than normal utility rates. You have to change filters all the time. It's just not quality, and they have no indoor plumbing. So we need to start taking care of that. So currently we are putting plans together to put an addition onto Shepherd Elementary School from the 2012 bond issue that will add an addition to house those kids that are currently in trailers. So there'll really be no change in the building capacity. We'll just make it real capacity. We'll do the same thing at West Boulevard Elementary School. And with this bond issue we're floating forward in April of 2014, we'll be looking at a couple more elementary schools that have the ability and the space to build mortar and brick and bathrooms and other ancillary spaces with them to get rid of the trailers. We think that by about 2018, we will be down to where there's just a small percentage of trailers that are still in use.
Okay. And we'll talk more about that bond issue a little bit later, too. But before we move on past Mill Creek, why don't we talk a little bit about one issue we talked about in the intro to the show was the diversity aspect of this move as well. Some parents have expressed concerns over that. Christine, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, Mill Creek, by nature of the makeup of the students that attend there, is not one of our diverse schools. When you look at diverse schools in our district, you think of really all the other schools have much more diversity than Mill Creek. And it's not Mill Creek's fault by any means. It's just the makeup of where the families and students come in from. So taking free and reduced lunch status from 12% to 6% is not necessarily changing the diversity face of the school, because I don't think 12% is diverse. And I don't think lunch status necessarily signifies diversity. That's a component of diversity, but there's ethnicity and
It's kind of economic component, right?
Right, it's an economic component. I mean, it is a component of diversity because I think that adds to the nature of the school. But there's all other aspects of diversity too that Mill Creek just doesn't have. But the problem is that we can't take other students that maybe live further away from where these students live, which is down off Scott Boulevard, and take them to Paxton. That just doesn't make sense. So what the board recommended, or what we talked about, was those students going to Paxton now, and then we tabled the discussion about when the new school opens, if their district to go back to the new school, they could choose to either stay at Paxton or go to the new school. Okay. But there's really nothing, I don't know where we pull the diversity into a school, because I don't think anybody in our board or in our administrative team is in favor of busing students for the sake of getting diversity. And so Mill Creek and even the new school will probably need to create some other ways to introduce diversity to those schools if the student population doesn't bring it in and of itself, is my opinion.
And I would add that this is a short-term issue. This is for 2 years. After 2 years, when the new school opens on the southwest side of town, there will be a domino effect. This will make the boundary changes we're talking about now seem small, because you're going to have to domino about 4 or 5 schools around to properly populate those buildings. When you do that, that is a really strong time to have the discussion about which of those dominoing effects create the best mixture of kids within various buildings. Right now we have an island that goes to Russell that drives across 2 school boundaries to get to Russell, and that was a decision made by a previous board that wanted to let the parents stay in a school that they liked, which has now created problems for this board. But after 2 years, we're going to take care of that issue. but it's going to require changes in boundaries not only for the new school, Mill Creek, Rockbridge Elementary, Fairview, Paxton Keeley, and Midway. And maybe some more that get sort of nudged around. So it's going to be quite a boundary change, and at that point you can have a much stronger discussion about diversity. But this community and all the boundary work we've done have said we want geographical boundaries that make sense. Within that, we want as much diversity as is possible, but we don't want to sell one out for the other.
Take a moment to remind our audience that this is Intersection, a program of KBIA and the Reynolds Journalism Institute. I'm Ryan Famuliner, and today we're talking about some of the measures Columbia Public Schools is taking to try to address overcrowding in schools, as well as a number of other issues. Joining us in studio today, Chris Belcher is the superintendent of Columbia Public Schools, Christine King is the president of the Columbia Board of Education, and Jonathan Sessions is a member of the board. And we'd love to hear from you in our audience as well. Are you concerned about any of the changes at Mill Creek Elementary? Give us a call at 573-882-8925 or email intersection@kbia.org. You could also tweet at intersectkbia, and feel free to ask any other questions or on topics you'd like to hear our guests discuss today. We'd like to remind you that you can watch Intersection as streaming video online during our live conversations every Monday afternoon at 2 at kbia.org. You can watch that video and join our online chat by going to kbia.org and scrolling down to the link for Intersection. Again, that's Mondays at 2 online at kbia.org. And before we went, you were talking about that there, Chris, about the geographical concerns. I mean, what are some of the concerns? I mean, when you get down to it, if, areas, if the community is self-segregating anyway where they live, geographically that may be difficult, I suppose, to create that diversity. So what are some of the practical concerns that come? I mean, you mentioned transportation. What are some of the practical concerns that come into this equation, I guess?
Yeah, with geographical boundaries, you want to use the existing infrastructure of roads and proximity. You want to serve neighborhoods the best you can and take care of those issues. The only way to do something different would be to take islands of neighborhoods and bust them across boundaries in order to try to get a population mix. That is not a popular concept to float. The other thing we noticed, for example, when we did the secondary boundaries, which was a very big boundary change, by the way, that has worked out rather well, the one nuance we learned was the parents that wanted to stay at Gentry Middle School simply moved. So even when you try to do things that distribute your population more evenly, which is what we're trying to do with Jeff Middle School and Gentry, we had about 75 kids that continued at Gentry, and we said, now, wait a minute, our predictions are wrong. They had moved. Everyone assumed that we were allowing transfers. We allowed 17 transfers to Gentry, so it wasn't a transfer issue. So even when you try to do that, people will make decisions, and if the housing market is such that they can sell one house and move to another, they will do that because that's what they want. So you can't engineer it to any great degree without people exerting their own will. Therefore, let's set the boundaries the best we possibly can. Let's talk about the value of diversity. Let's encourage development to provide different kinds of housing levels. But that's about all we can do as a school board is influence the discussion. We can't dictate it.
Okay. Why isn't it popular? The island idea may be obvious, but why isn't that? You said it's not popular. What are the problems there, John?
Well, and I speak as a child of Columbia that grew up in that pocket of Russell that then drove past Fairview Elementary across Stadium to get to Russell Boulevard Elementary. You lose that community feel. You lose the walkability of the school. My parents would often joke, it's like, can't you find friends that live in the neighborhood? You're always finding friends from school that live in the other boundary of Russell. So you lose that broad sense of community as when you create a boundary around a school as opposed to a little pocket here, a little pocket there. Of course, you have that neighborhood feel, but a large portion of your family is separated by boundaries to 3 other elementary schools.
Sure.
So that's the goal of trying to create that single boundary. And even still today, we still have some very interesting shapes to some of those elementary schools. So it's
that's also a product of a very growing community. You know, when the Russell boundary was created, Chapel Hill didn't go all the way through. They didn't have all the development on the like off Louisville. And so
Louisville didn't exist.
No, and so now when we show our maps, it's even more pronounced. You just kind of go, before it wasn't as pronounced because you didn't have all the development. And now with it and growing, it is even more pronounced. And we also have tools in place that we can do a better job at predicting growth and enrollment in our schools than what we had probably 10, 15 years ago, for sure.
Great. We actually have a caller on the line. I wanted to bring her into the conversation. Melissa from Columbia. Melissa, are you there?
I am.
Hi. Yeah, thanks very much for calling in today.
Thanks. I am in the group that is actually west of Forum, but now redistricted to Russell. And my question is about allowing the siblings of fifth graders to remain there next year as well. They've offered the option for fifth graders to stay, which I think is wonderful, but they seem to be telling us that they're not going to allow siblings to attend. And I don't understand how a parent is supposed to get kids to now schools that are miles apart at the exact same time, twice a day, and for activities. And I don't think you can make the analogy that you might have one in middle school and one in elementary the next year anyway, because those schools start at different times. So I'd like to know their thoughts on that and why they would think that that is any kind of a workable solution for parents. And I know that they've said that the difference will be a 33% difference, but if you are already talking about letting the 13 fifth graders remain, then your difference is really only 20%, not 33%.
Well, Melissa, thank you for calling in, and I understand your concern. And I think from a board perspective, really the boundary lines that we changed or that we adjusted were all students in those boundary lines are now redistricted to other schools, Russell, Grant, Paxton. We are allowing fifth graders, if they choose, to stay at Mill Creek. We're not saying fifth graders have to stay, and we haven't decided as a board if we're going to allow siblings to stay or not. We've tabled that till January. So assuming that we say no, siblings need to go to their new district school, that we do not allow them to stay at Mill Creek, then the parents really need to choose, do they want their students at two schools, or do they make the decision to have fifth graders move to their new elementary school? We have had situations in the past where when we did boundary lines and we opened up new schools, Paxton Keeley was one of them, fifth graders moved. So although for a parent it may not be the most ideal that they believe, we have done it in the past. It has worked in the past. That I know the one fifth grade student at Paxton that won the scholarship in 2010 was a fifth grader that moved over from Fairview to Paxton his last year, and he talked about what he gained from that experience. So the broad boundary change that we made for this was all students in those boundary lines are now district to those schools. We're making an exception if a fifth grader should choose to want to stay at Mill Creek. So we're not saying they have to. I understand that concern, and if we don't allow the siblings, then I think it's the parent choice if they want to have two separate schools or have all their children attend the school that they're now boundaried to.
But do you see how it's not really a choice if you can't make both of those work?
Well, some people might be able to work. I can't speak for each family, Melissa. I mean, I just can't do that. I'm just explaining to you what the options are that we have put out there.
Okay. Well, thanks very much for calling in, Melissa. We appreciate it. We actually had a comment too I wanted to bring in from Andrew in a chat room. He asked, kind of back to that conversation about trailers and about the capacity issues. He was asking if any trailers will need to be brought into Paxton Keeley to accommodate the students that are being transferred there. No. By the numbers, Paxton's now over capacity by adding Mill Creek students.
We had that conversation. I think that was actually a question that a member of the board asked, and that is something that Dr. Stiepelman has looked into. He's our assistant superintendent of elementary education. He said there should be no issue with moving the number of students to Paxton Keeley. That the space they have is available. They have some spaces that are used for non-classroom space that are available for classroom space. So there is no need to transfer or to move any trailers into Paxton to handle the number of students that are moving in there.
Okay. I'm going to take another moment to remind our audience that this is Intersection, a program of KBIA and the Reynolds Journalism Institute. I'm Ryan Famuliner, and today we're talking about some of the measures Columbia Public Schools is taking to try to address overcrowding in schools, as well as a number of other issues. Joining us in studio today, Chris Belcher is the superintendent of Columbia Public Schools, Christine King is the president of the Columbia Board of Education, and Jonathan Sessions is a member of the board. We'd like to hear from you and our audience as well. Are you in favor of the $50 million bond issue to Columbia Public Schools? Give us a call at 573-882-8925 or email intersection@kbia.org. You can also tweet at IntersectKBIA, and you can feel free to ask questions on any other topics you'd like to hear our guests from Columbia Public Schools discuss today as well. So I saw you all nodding when I talked about the $50 million bond issue. It sounds like you're all in approval of it. Tell us a little bit about what we're asking for. Again, I guess it was approved last week that this will go on the ballot in April, I believe.
Well, I'll turn over to Jonathan and Christine in a minute, but I do want to point out that one of the most positive aspects of our 2012 bond issue was that we gave a handout at that time that showed the next 10 years of bond issues every other year. That last year, or in 2012, it was a 12-cent increase in order to get the capacity necessary to start the plan. And we said that in 2014 that it could be as high as an 8-cent increase before it would start going to no tax rate increase every 2 years. Pleased to say that this bond issue is 4 cents. The assessed valuation has grown adequately or enough that it's reduced the amount of taxation necessary to get to that $50 million bond issue. Most likely, every 2 years after that, the board will say how much is available with a no tax rate increase. They'll go for a bond issue for that and decide what to do with that. That's what many of the growing suburban districts have been doing for years, is a 2-year cycle, and I'm so excited that we're very close to getting to the point to where we have the capacity within the debt service levy to do a 2-year cycle to take care of the 5th largest school district in the state of Missouri. I've had people say, well, when's enough enough? I said, well, when we don't have trailers and when our maintenance issues are done and when we provide the quality of a facility that this community expects. And this is a very well-crafted plan, financially sound, but aggressive to take care of the needs that have been neglected over the years.
Is it a sufficient amount? I mean, do we need
Yeah,
more than this too?
It is. We really sat down right after the 2010 bond issue because we knew the next step and part of this plan was to eliminate trailers in the district. And every time we had opened up an elementary school at this point, it was barely enough to handle growth. When we sat down putting together what we would need and when we would need it to handle elementary school growth, it was truly, what are the numbers? And as Christine mentioned earlier, we have more accurate data than we've ever had before. We're finally able to look in and say, here's the exact number of physical classrooms in a building. This is the number of students it'll hold. Here's the growth we expect over the district. Where do we need to be in number of classrooms, at this date and this date to eliminate trailers by, and our hope is, right as we hit 2020 and into 22 as we pass that bond issue. That's our goal. And this is the first time I think we truly have sat down with how do we overcome the growth while taking care of the lack of facilities we have, while still, as Chris mentioned, trying to take care of the buildings we have. We have a lot of buildings that are over 100 years. We have several buildings that are over 100 years old and a lot of buildings that are pushing 100 years old. That takes a lot of maintenance to keep those buildings that our community loves, keep them in good shape.
Yeah. And so how much of it too, I mean, we talked about it here, but how much of it is going to specifically address some of these overcrowding issues too, I guess, as far as new schools? And
of this bond issue, about 28 million will be for a new elementary school. And this is a new elementary school in addition to the new elementary school in the Northeast and the Southwest. This would be a new elementary school. It also has some a little bit on there for an expansion to an elementary school. We don't necessarily know where that would be yet, but as we get towards these monies becoming available in 2016, we would make that decision as a board. It also includes quite a bit for maintenance, the general maintenance. We have a lot of roofs in the district. Roofs in the district.
I mean, even Alpha Heart Lewis before too long will need to spend money on its maintenance. I mean, buildings start to wear out. Paxton Keeley, didn't we have to do a new roof or something at Paxton Keeley over the last?
We have we have hail damage, as we did. How many a year and a half ago? We had a storm roll through. We took quite a bit of hail damage. Some of that was covered under insurance and warranty. Some of that we need to still get repaired. We also have a little bit in here for technology as well as a part of this 2014 bond issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the technology piece I need to add, is for infrastructure only.
Yeah.
We have moved into our operating budget money for instructional technology. So when you see it on a bond issue, it's for fiber between buildings, increasing bandwidth.
It's not for the iPad minis.
No, it is not for iPads.
Get that clear.
Right.
And the important thing is everything's going online. Our testing model in 2015, all kids will have to take the test online. And I tell you, there's going to be a lot of school districts out there that are going to see their systems crash. They do not have the capacity to do that at the same time we do. I think in 5 years, one of my biggest success stories is when I came here, we had not wireless in one building. And I panicked a little bit thinking we need to get ahead of the game because no one was hiding what was going to be coming down the road. And we put together a great plan, and our technology team delivered really well. And we are now ahead of the curve and ready to take on some of those changes that are going to come over the next 3 to 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, and back to the conversation about overcrowding, too, I guess you're talking about all the elementary schools that are included in the plan right now. I mean, is that really where we're seeing most of the problems right now with enrollment levels? I mean, we're seeing above capacity there.
Well,
I mean,
you think you spend 6 years in elementary school versus 3 in middle, 4 in high school. So when we have growth of either new families coming in or, people having more children, the growth stays with you. The overpopulation, if you want to call it that, stays with you the longest in the elementary level. Now, I would foresee that the board somewhere down the line might want to have a conversation about geographically our middle schools don't really make the most sense. We have 3 all within about a 2-mile radius of each other, and then we have Gentry, Oakland, and Lang. So I know we've had some conversations about, do we need to plan for a 7th middle school? And although I don't necessarily believe that we need to have a 7th middle school, but do we need to do something about geographics about our school? Because if you look at all the growth in the Southwest, and this is not the board has not talked about this, but I think that's a conversation that as we talk about our bond issue, how do we want to maybe help out our community with the geographics of that? Because that was very challenging in our secondary boundary lines discussion of having Smithton West and Jeff so close to each other, and then Oakland and Lang way up north near them, and then Gentry out by themselves. And Gentry just can't hold all the kids that probably should attend there based on the distance to the school.
But from a population standpoint, the opening of Battle High School and the shift to a middle school program has really resolved the issues we've faced with overcrowding at the secondary level, and that's why we've been able to eliminate a lot of the trailers at that level. It's the elementary that we still need to focus our efforts on right now.
Sure. We do have to take a quick break. This is Intersection, a program of KBIA and the Reynolds Journalism Institute. Joining us in studio today are Chris Belcher, the superintendent of Columbia Public Schools, Christine King, the president of the Columbia Board of Education, and Jonathan Sessions, a member of the board. I'm Ryan Famulner. We'll be right back after a short break.